Hey, good evening to you. Mark Sudduth here. Evening update regarding Tropical Storm Beryl. And it's still Saturday, the 6th of July, but doing another update for you just to bring some new info in front of you in case you've been out and about doing stuff today and you haven't been keeping up. Not much has changed with the structure of Beryl. Pressure not really dropping yet. The wind's still about 60 miles per hour. We are waiting to see if that dry air, that's the biggest impediment right now. The shear has pretty much let up. The water temperatures are plenty warm. There's lots of upper ocean heat content for this to take advantage of. But dry air in tropical systems does not allow them to develop very much. So what do we know that's new? Wanted to point this out. The storm surge warning has been extended along the Texas coast eastward. I'll show you that graphically in just a minute. I mentioned in my morning update that I suspected that we would see the extension of that hazard to the east some, and it now actually extends into Louisiana. We'll look at that in just a moment. But the rainfall potential, apparently I got it off just a little bit earlier today, and so I will correct myself. Houston, in the yellow here, at least it makes it easier, 4 to 6 inches around the greater Houston area, and then the swath that you see in these orange colors here, 6 to 8, and then 8 to 12 potentially. And we'll just have to see how well organized Beryl is and how fast it moves. And that's a big factor in a lot of this, how the band's set up. You could get a very heavy band of rain over the greater Houston area. There's a lot of interest there for obvious reasons with the flood history in and around Houston. But elsewhere, anywhere in that yellow, and even in the green, honestly, a lot of heavy rain coming. And that does extend up into Arkansas as we start the early part of next week. A few other things to point out for you. This is really important. I mentioned this earlier. I want to keep hammering it. A slight to moderate risk of heavy rainfall or flash flooding covering a pretty large area, and that just covers part of Houston there into Harris County. So please remember this. You got to remember back to Imelda 2019, Harvey 2017, the Tax Day flood of 2016, the Memorial Day flood of 2015. If you're new to the greater Houston area, there is a massive flood problem when you get too much rain. They've got an incredible infrastructure in place to try to help it and mitigate that. But even it can get overwhelmed. So just pay attention, pay attention, pay attention. And please, as we say, don't be driving through the flood water. If you think you can make it, you've got a big truck, whatever, don't do it. So here's what I wanted to point out too. The storm surge watch and warning area, maybe one day this graphic will look like it's not from 1983, but story for another day. A lot of pixels in there, right? So the storm surge watch has been extended eastward along the Texas coast towards the Sabine Pass up here bordering Texas and Louisiana. This is all the storm surge warning, so it's quite a big area in the storm surge warning, and that means that we could be expecting life-threatening storm surge a few feet above normally dry ground. How high that surge could be, well, let's take a look at the peak surge. This too has gone up. I suspected that might be the case, and it has gone up in some of these areas. Matagorda Bay, 4 to 6 feet. And out on the islands here, the barrier islands and some of these cities along the area that they have put place markers for, we got to be ready for that. This could be pretty disruptive. Even up into Galveston Bay and vicinity, 3 to 5 feet. And that's the peak surge. That's the highest if it comes in on high tide and everything lines up just right. The worst case scenario, up to 6 feet in the yellow, in the blue areas up to 3 feet. And that does now include southwest Louisiana. So some flooding potential there in these low-lying regions of the southwest part of Louisiana, west of Cameron. And I further think that there will be more extensions of storm surge problems just because of the shape of the coastline up here. And this is just a very efficient area to capture water and make the water rise where it meets the land. It's just pretty simple physics. As the sun sets on Beryl, again, it is still undergoing structural changes. There's some dry air in here. Trying to mix that out with this deep convection that we're seeing. Water temperatures, as I mentioned in my morning update, very warm the closer you get to the coast. So that's not going to be an impeding factor. The real hurdle right now is the dry air. And the storm is trying to mix that out. It's a process, the release of that latent heat and getting the moisture up, the relative humidity values in the mid-levels of the atmosphere especially. Once, and assuming that that does happen, we could see Beryl develop a more intact and robust inner core somewhere in here. Recon will be in and out, and it won't be too many more hours that this will become close enough to Brownsville radar and eventually Corpus Christi radar that we can watch this from land and see how that core structure is doing. So the track map, important to note that there have been some subtle changes, a little bit more north overall with the track of the center. But as you know, we keep hammering this, the effects extend well away from that center and even far inland. Hopefully people know this, just here to remind you. So the track forecast does bring the center of Beryl ashore just to the south and west of Matagorda Bay. So areas like Port Lavaca, Palacios, and even Port O'Connor could be within what we call that right front quadrant. Let's use red to make it show up better. So the right front quadrant is this section right in here, where you'd have the strongest winds, and I can show you this better on the HWRF model in just a minute. It's very easy to understand it looking at the reflectivity of the simulated radar from the HWRF. But yeah, we could have a big area here under the gun of hurricane force wind and storm surge along the coast extending all the way up through these populated areas. From Freeport, you really start to get more populated up towards Galveston, Bermuda Beach, Jamaica Beach, that area, San Luis Pass, all of that. Pretty problematic coming into very early Monday morning. And then, of course, the threat of wind and rain, trees down, power outages, maybe even some severe weather. That's going to spread into this huge population area in and around the greater Houston metroplex, whatever you want to call it. Houston is a giant area of multiple bullseyes of road structure, road networks, and over 4 million people live in that region. So it's going to affect quite a few people, as you can clearly see. And it's mostly going to be on the right-hand side that the worst of the weather will extend. For the areas inland near the hill country, not as promising for rain from this, unfortunately. Not completely out of the picture, but it's going to be more the east side, especially. And any of those really heavy bands that come in, I'll show you that on the simulated radar in a minute from that HWRF model. You're going to have to really watch those. Those could prove to be tornadic. We'll talk about that more in tomorrow morning's update. So, a lot of you know Mike's weather page and, of course, tropicaltidbits.com that he cites here in this post. I really like this, the comparison of the 4 different models that we can look at for specific intensity for Beryl. And this graphic really helps illustrate, this is the wind field that we're looking at, and 10-meter wind speeds. You have the HMON, which replaced the old GFDL, and then we have the newer models, these halves, and I got to learn more about these. I'm admittedly behind the curve because there's so much new stuff coming online. I remember the old HWRF from years ago when they started it, and now they're getting ready to retire it. The HWRF's done really well. That's the Hurricane Weather Research Forecast model. But the 4 different intensity models, the bottom line, all of them, and if we go back to what Mike was saying in the post, show 960 to 970 millibar range for pressure at landfall, meaning that we will drop. Let's go back to the Hurricane Center homepage. Where are we right now? Beryl is at 997. So to the point here, what Mike's pointing out in this post, we could lose or shave off anywhere from 37 millibars to 27 millibars of deepening. And that is significant enough that we could see a quickly strengthening hurricane all the way up to landfall. And we can see that reflected in the HWRF model. I'll show you that one specifically. This is tomorrow morning, Sunday morning at 8 a.m. Eastern Time, or 12 Zulu, as we call it. And it shows the pressure down at 987 at that point. So if we get up tomorrow and the pressure is at or below that, we know that the HWRF has done a great job of handling this. So that'll be an interesting benchmark. Moving this forward, the pressure continues to drop. The organization of the would-be hurricane in this scenario continues to improve. There's the pressure there in the mid to low 970s. And then finally, a landfall here in the area between Corpus Christi and we'll say Port O'Connor, and it goes inland. And that's that band I was telling you about. Look at that right there. I'll highlight it in blue here so it shows up. You probably can't miss it. That's the kind of thing that when that comes in, that can dump some seriously very heavy rainfall, bring some high wind with it, maybe the threat of tornadoes. We'll have to see about that. But then look what happens. Beryl moves inland, and now that big band does try to get close to the Houston area. Houston will be sitting generally up in this area, kind of sprawled out, right? And very heavy rain wrapping around, and even 975 well inland on Monday afternoon, showing you that the atmosphere finally lines up and we just need to hope that this doesn't happen 4 to 6 hours earlier and Beryl gets stronger even quicker before landfall there. So it's going to be an interesting 24 to 30 hours ahead, and then beyond that time as Beryl makes its way deep inland over Texas. All right, before I let you go, we are going to be streaming live on our YouTube channel starting tomorrow morning. We being myself and my colleague Matt from Colorado, who's come down to assist me. Lots of chasers, storm chasers, hurricane chasers, media. Everybody's going to be out here, of course, doing their own thing. We've been doing this going all the way back to 2004 and 5 when we first started doing serious field work, and live in 2005. And now we've got the remote cams we're going to put out, the live vehicle cam, all that good stuff. So if you're watching this on YouTube, because I do put this on Patreon as well, subscribe to the channel, get notifications when we're going live, and you'll know what's going on. And you can see all the different stuff we've got too. I'll promote some of our documentaries that we have and our updates. We even have playlists and podcasts called Hurricane U. Lots of good stuff here on YouTube. So if you're just now tuning in and finding our channel, subscribe, like, share. You know what they say. We appreciate it. It's good to have you watching. Hopefully you learned something and you're staying on top of this, especially if you have interests in the Lone Star State and even beyond. So I'll get some sleep tonight. Matt and I will be working on getting all the equipment ready. I'll get up early in the morning. We'll do another morning update. And then, folks, we're live. And we will be live as long as we have a signal. And I'll be able to talk to you live from the vehicle. And it'll be quite remarkable. And you'll see and hear everything we're doing, especially as we set up our remote cams and a barometer, too, to capture the pressure readings live as this would-be hurricane comes in late tomorrow night into early Monday. Hopefully it'll be after daylight Monday, but we shall see. Have a great rest of your Saturday. Thanks for tuning in to me. I'm Mark Sudduth for HurricaneTrack. I'll talk to you again tomorrow morning.